when I was living in China for the first time in the early 1990s, the average Chinese person wouldn't even talk to you on the street because they were afraid of being thrown in jail. And now, almost 20 years later, there are many public protests in China, most of which don't end in violence. And in many cases, the Chinese government actually makes concessions to the protesters. Because if China wants to be a world player, whether it's economically or politically or culturally, it needs to play by generally accepted rules. And so that's what's happening here, is China is being forced by virtue of its integration into the world order to adapt. Open political dissent is still not tolerated, although it's starting to creep into some public discourse. But 20 years ago, things that would get you thrown in jail, like talking to a foreigner, like reading the wrong book, like saying the wrong thing in a political study session, are not a problem in today's China. So there's been considerable progress. But there's a lot of ground left to cover. Now, certainly strong-arming China and pressuring China and bullying China is not going to change Chinese behavior. And in fact, could set back the process of change in China because it would reduce the incentive for the Chinese government to engage with the outside world. I think China will ultimately become a democracy. The interests of such a large middle class cannot be protected by any other form of government. Now, will that democracy look like the United States democracy? Again, very, very hard to say. Probably not quite. But when you have several 100 million people who have their own cars, their own apartments or houses or businesses, their own economic interests, their social interests, those things are going to demand political protection. And the only way that those interests will receive political protection is through some sort of pluralistic, participatory political system.